You retire with exactly $500,000 and you start pulling 8%, $40,000 in your first year. On paper, the math looks airtight. Stocks have averaged around 12% a year, inflation around 3%, so 8% feels like money that is safely yours to spend. Here is what that math never tells you. Retire into the wrong stretch of market history, and that same plan can drain your account dry well before a 30-year retirement is over. The money gone while you still have years of life left to fund, and far too late to start over. Retire into a good stretch with the exact same $500,000 and the exact same 8%, and you could sail through a full 30-year retirement with money still to spare. Same amount. Same plan. Two opposite endings. And the deciding factor was never how smart or careful you were. It was one thing you never got to choose: the order the market happened to hand you your returns. That is not a hypothetical. It is real calendar years, real dollar losses, and real retirees who did not find out until it was too late to adjust. In the next 15 minutes, you will see exactly why the 12% average argument breaks down the moment you start pulling money out. You will see the specific historical sequences that exposed it, and I will show you a research-backed alternative that lets many retirees start above 4% without betting their last decade on a cooperating market. My name is John, and I cover the retirement math that does not always make it into the glossy plan your advisor hands you. Here is what we will cover today. Step 1. Where the 8% math comes from and the single flaw that undermines it. Step 2. What real history shows when you apply the rule to the worst sequences. Step 3. What the research actually says the safe number is. Step 4. The Guardrails system that lets you start above 4% with math on your side. And Step 5. 3 moves that reduce your exposure before a bad sequence arrives. Before we get to Step 4, the Guardrails system, I want you to know that the most important lever in that section is not the starting withdrawal rate. It is something most people building a retirement plan completely overlook. We will get there. Before Step 1, do me a quick favor. If number-driven breakdowns like this are your kind of retirement content, tap subscribe now. It is the easiest way to catch the next one the moment it is up. This is education, not financial advice. Walk through your specific numbers with a fee-only fiduciary who knows your situation. Step 1. Where the 8% argument comes from, and the one thing it gets wrong. The case for 8% rests on one number, the historical average return of the U.S. stock market. The long-run arithmetic average of U.S. large-cap stocks going back to 1926 lands around 12%. Inflation over long periods has averaged roughly 3%. Subtract 3 from 12, round down for caution, and you land on 8%. The math is real. The error is in what the word average is doing. Here is the simplest way to see it. 2 years. Year 1, the market drops 50%. Year 2, it gains 50%. The average return is 0. But your portfolio did not break even. A dollar that falls to 50 cents, then gains 50%, ends at 75 cents. You lost 25% on a sequence that averaged 0. Now add withdrawals. Every year, you pull money out regardless of what the market did. In a down year, you sell shares at depressed prices to cover expenses. And those shares are gone, unable to participate in any future recovery. The 12% average assumes you capture the good years symmetrically with the bad. A retiree making fixed withdrawals cannot. The bad years extract more damage than the good years repair because you are selling into the floor. This is sequence of returns risk. The reason retirement income planning runs on different math than accumulation, and the single flaw the 8% argument never accounts for. Step 2. What actually happened to 8% withdrawals in real history? Take a retiree who retired in 1966. one of the most punishing sequences in the U.S. record. The late 1960s brought flat to declining markets, followed by back-to-back annual declines of roughly 14%, and then roughly 26% in 1973 and 1974. Damodaran total return data, dividends included. At the same time, inflation ran above 10% annually by mid-decade, per BLS data. At 8% of a $500,000 starting balance, that is $40,000 in year one, on the commonly tested 50% U.S. stocks. 50% intermediate-term Treasury portfolio from Bengen's original research, rebalanced annually with inflation-adjusted withdrawals. As the required withdrawal climbs through the stagflation years, you're pulling more dollars from a portfolio that is simultaneously falling. Each forced sale locks in a loss. Shares sold at the bottom of 1973 and 1974 are gone before the great bull market of the 1980s begins. Bengen's research, testing every rolling 30-year period back to 1926, identifies 1966 as one of the hardest starting years on record, alongside 1929 and 1937. A portfolio drawing 8% annually from that era's actual sequence is depleted well before the 30-year mark, what researchers call portfolio failure. On a starting rate that roughly doubles the tested SAFEMAX, depletion typically arrives within 15 to 25 years. Now look at 2000 through 2002. The S&P 500 declined roughly 49%. From its March 2000 peak to its October 2002 trough. A retiree who stopped working in early 2000 stepped into 3 consecutive down years, and at 8% withdrawals, the forced selling permanently reduced the portfolio's capital base before 2008 arrived with another major drawdown. These are not edge cases. Any retirement that begins just before a multi-year bear market, drawing 8% annually, carries a genuine risk of running dry within 15 to 20 years, and most people retiring today at 65 are statistically likely to live well into their 80s and beyond. Step 3. What the research says the actual safe number is. William Bengen spent the better part of the 1990s testing withdrawal rates not against average returns, but against every actual 30-year historical period on record, using U.S. stocks and intermediate-term government bonds, rebalanced annually with inflation-adjusted withdrawals from year one. His answer, approximately 4.03%, is the highest rate that survived every worst-case historical 30-year window, the SAFEMAX. It held through 1929, through 1937, through the 1966 to 1973 stretch. Not the typical starting year, the absolute worst ones. Adding small cap stocks to the allocation raised that historical ceiling to around 4.5%. For a 40-year retirement horizon, realistic if you retire at 60 or if one spouse is significantly younger, the SAFEMAX drops instead to approximately 3.72%. The longer the runway, the lower the safe starting rate. And the 4% rule was calibrated against U.S. historical data, which was exceptional by global standards. Applied to a broader set of developed market histories, the rule survived only about 68% of the time. The rate needed for 90% global success drops to around 2.8%. The U.S. track record is real. It is not the only track record in the world. In dollar terms, on a $500,000 portfolio, 8% is $40,000 a year, 4% is $20,000. That $20,000 annual gap is the difference between what the historically tested math supports and what the 12-3 argument tells you that you can spend. Take your projected annual retirement spending, subtract your Social Security income, and divide the result by your portfolio value. That fraction is your actual required withdrawal rate, above or below 4%. Drop it in the comments. I read everyone. Step 4. The Guardrails system. A smarter answer than a fixed rate. Stopping at 4% is the safe rate, leaves real money on the table. The more useful answer is not a fixed number you set on day one and never revisit. It is a dynamic system with built-in flexibility that lets many retirees start above the 4% floor without the failure risk of a fixed 8% approach. It works like this. A widely studied version, developed by financial planners Jonathan Guyton and William Klinger, documents starting rates around 5% to 5.5%, above the fixed-rate SAFEMAX, paired with 2 guardrails, an upper ceiling and a lower floor, typically set about 20% above and below your starting rate. Each year, you check your actual withdrawal percentage against your current portfolio value. Above the upper guardrail, cut the annual draw by 10%. Below the lower floor, take a 10% raise. In between, skip the inflation increase rather than cutting the dollar amount. Why does this work when a fixed 8% does not? The fatal flaw of 8% is the fixed commitment. You are obligated to pull $40,000 a year no matter what the market does, forcing you to sell at the bottom of every downturn. The Guardrails system cuts that selling during the bad years, so more shares survive into the recovery. In exchange, your annual spending is not guaranteed constant, some years less, some years more. But research supports it as a net improvement over a rigid low rate for many retirees. And here is the lever I flagged at the start. The most powerful move is not finessing your withdrawal rate. It is reducing your dependence on the portfolio in the first place. Every dollar of guaranteed lifetime income from Social Security or a pension is a dollar of portfolio you do not need to liquidate. A retiree who needs $40,000 from the portfolio faces 8% sequence risk on a $500,000 account. One who needs only $20,000 because Social Security covers the rest faces 4% sequence risk. Same account, completely different exposure. This is why Social Security timing connects directly to the 8% problem. Delaying from 62 to 70 increases your monthly benefit by roughly 77% for someone born in 1960 or later, with a full retirement age of 67. Filing at 62 locks in a permanent 30% reduction, while waiting to 70 earns delayed credits that push the benefit to 124% of your full amount. That is a permanent, inflation-adjusted raise backed by the federal government, and each dollar of it is a dollar you do not have to sell from your portfolio in the dangerous first years of retirement. Whether delaying makes sense depends on your health, your spouse's benefit, and your break-even math. But the connection is direct. A higher Social Security floor means a lower required portfolio withdrawal rate, and that is one of the most effective protections against the sequence risk that breaks the 8% rule. Step 5. 3 moves that reduce your exposure before you retire. The returns experienced in the early years of retirement weigh disproportionately on long-run outcomes. Shares sold at depressed prices to fund living expenses are permanently gone. They cannot participate in any future recovery. A bad starting sequence is a structural disadvantage that compounds forward. The first move: know your actual withdrawal rate before you settle on a spending plan. Most people work backward from a lifestyle. Start instead from your projected portfolio value. Apply the historically grounded SAFEMAX for your time horizon and see what annual spending it actually supports. Closing a gap before retirement is far easier than closing it after a bad first year. The second move: build a cash buffer before you stop working. Holding roughly 2 years of living expenses in cash, the gap between your total spending and Social Security or pension income, lets you avoid selling equities during market declines lasting under 2 years. When markets fall, you draw from cash and your stocks stay in place. It does not eliminate sequence risk, but it buys the portfolio time to recover. The third move: start the portfolio transition before retirement day, not after. Research identifies the 2 to 3 years before your retirement date as nearly as dangerous as the first years after it. Shifting some allocation toward lower volatility in those final years is one of the most underused sequence risk moves available, and one of the few you can act on before the damage starts. Here is the one thing this whole video comes down to. The 8% rule is not a lie. It is a misapplication of real math to the wrong problem. Average returns describe what happens while you are putting money in. The moment you start pulling money out, the average becomes a misleading guide. What determines whether your retirement survives is the sequence, not the average. The historically grounded research says roughly 4% for a fixed, rigid withdrawal over a 30-year retirement. A flexible guardrail system lets you start closer to 5% or 5.5% if you're willing to adjust spending with the market. And building a strong guaranteed income floor, particularly Social Security timing, is the most direct lever for reducing the portfolio withdrawal pressure that makes sequence risk dangerous in the first place. Start there. Adjust from there. Any fixed high rate that ignores the sequence problem is the one that actually breaks retirements. Your assignment before you leave. Take your expected annual retirement spending, subtract your projected Social Security income, and divide the remainder by your current portfolio value. If that fraction is above 4%, you now know exactly what your planning conversation needs to address. Nothing here is personal financial advice. It is education. Take what fits your situation and walk through the details with a fee-only fiduciary who can model your actual numbers. Retirement is not about chasing the highest withdrawal rate. It is about making sure you do not run out of money before you run out of time. If this changed how you look at the withdrawal rate decision, drop the word guardrails in the comments. If someone you know is building a plan around the 8% argument, share this with them. Hit the like button before you go, and if you're not subscribed yet, now is a good time.